Picture a drawing room in London. The year is 1876. Afternoon light comes through tall windows and falls across a table where a man is turning the pages of a sketchbook slowly, without speaking. The man is John Ruskin, the most powerful voice in the art world of the Victorian era. He has written 12 volumes on the nature of beauty. He has made careers. He has ended them. He is not easily impressed, and he is not given to generosity for its own sake. He reaches the last page. He closes the book. He sets it on the table between them and looks at the young woman sitting across from him. "I have never seen," he says, "such natural power of drawing in any woman." He is not being kind. He is being exact. He tells her she could become the greatest living painter in England. He offers to train her personally, to give her access to his own eye for what the great masters understood and the lesser ones missed. He is telling her, in the plainest language a man of his stature uses, that she has been given something rare, that she should not waste it. The young woman sitting across from him is 23 years old. Her father died when she was 14, leaving the family with little room for anything that was not essential. She taught herself to draw, no lessons, no academy, because she could not stop her hand from moving across paper when she looked at the world. What Ruskin is examining is raw talent with no formal training, and he knows exactly what that means. Her name is Isabella Lilias Trotter. And here is the thing that will stop you cold, if you let it land. She is already spending her evenings in the East End of London, in cold halls that smell of coal smoke and damp wool, sitting with women who work 14-hour days in the mills and the laundries and the shops, and who the rest of the city walks past without seeing. She carries a small Bible in her coat pocket. She has been carrying it into those halls for years. She already knows what she is going to do with Ruskin's offer. She has known for some time. She simply has not said it yet. Have you ever been told, by someone who could genuinely see you, that you were made for something? That what was in your hands was real and rare and worth your whole life? And have you ever looked at that gift and then looked at something else, at someone else, and felt the weight of a question that had no comfortable answer? Lilias held that question for years. She did not make a dramatic announcement. She kept painting. She kept visiting those halls and those cold rooms and those faces no one was bothering to remember. And over time, what she had already chosen in the interior of her life became too clear to go on pretending otherwise. One afternoon she wrote in her journal, "I see as clear as daylight. I cannot give myself to painting in the way he means, and also to the master's work." She did not close the sketchbook forever. That is important. She did not decide that art and faith were enemies. She decided that she could not give both her full life, and she knew which one was asking for it. She paid with her future, the most prestigious offer she would ever receive. The chance at the kind of immortality that serious artists spend entire lifetimes reaching for. She laid it down quietly, without ceremony, without a public statement, and simply did not walk back through that door. And then she waited. 11 years of working in London, running a luncheon club for shop girls, sitting with women in the street who had no one sitting with them, learning what it meant to enter a world that was not hers, to go all the way in, not stand at the edge and extend a hand. She did not know yet where the formation was preparing her to go. She was simply learning the posture, learning what it cost to stay inside a compound that comfortable people drove past and never entered. In 1887 she heard about Algeria. The Muslim population of North Africa had been the subject of missionary effort for decades, and the results were, by any honest accounting, close to nothing. The few who had gone came back with little fruit to show for years of sacrifice. The language was Algerian Arabic, specific, oral, demanding. The culture was structured around a separation between the world of European newcomers and the world of Muslim families that was not written in any law, but was as solid as stone. Foreign women who arrived in Algiers went to live in the European quarter, with its cafes and its French colonial architecture and its social calendar that had almost nothing to do with the actual city around it. The Medina, the old city where Muslim families lived, where the women inside those households spent their days, was a world you could walk past but could not enter. Lilias applied to every mission society that might have supported her. They all said no. She had carried a heart condition since childhood, and every medical assessment predicted that the North African heat would end her quickly. She had no formal theological training. She had no institutional backing. She had 2 friends willing to go with her, a worn Bible and a sketchbook. She booked the passage anyway. She was 35 years old. Think about what she was walking away from and into in the same motion. The price she had paid for Ruskin's offer, that had been paid quietly, in a journal entry, without an audience. Now she paid the price of credibility. The woman he had called England's most promising painter was sailing for Algeria as an unsupported, unaccredited missionary whose doctors expected to die within a few years of arrival. She paid with her standing. She paid with her health. She paid with the version of her life that would have been remembered, and she sailed toward a door she did not yet know how to open. There is something about the way Lilias made decisions that is worth staying with. She did not wait for conditions to be right. She did not wait to be healthier, or sponsored, or credentialed enough. She counted the cost, and she moved. The people who change the world are almost never the ones who waited until the door was already standing open. Lilias arrived in Algiers in March of 1888, and within weeks, the thing she had feared about the door being closed turned out to be exactly as true as she had expected. She walked through the streets of the Medina. She could see the carved archways and the plaster walls and the women moving between the houses in their white hakes. She could not get inside. European women did not enter Muslim homes. It was not a policy. It was a wall built of centuries of separation that had no single stone you could point to and remove. She tried the obvious approaches. She learned the language. She found contacts at the port. She met a handful of men willing to speak with her. But the households were closed. The women she felt she had come specifically to reach were unreachable from where she stood. The wall did not yield to her effort. It did not yield to her goodwill. It yielded eventually to her sketchbook. She began to draw, not as a strategy she had found in a mission manual. She drew because she was Lilias Trotter, and she had always paid attention to the world through her hands, and the world in front of her, the faces at the market, the old men in the doorways, the light on the minarets at a certain hour, deserved to be seen. People stopped. They came to look. A merchant would pause to peer over her shoulder at the page. A woman at a window would linger where she might not have otherwise. Children crowded in close, pointing, pulling their friends over to see. They were looking at themselves, their hands, their streets, their faces, rendered with care by a foreign woman who had looked at them and found them worth preserving. Something cracked in the wall. A woman invited her in for tea. Then another. Then a third asked to see the drawings she had made of the neighborhood. The sketchbook was not a technique. It was simply what she was. A woman who had trained herself her whole life to really see. And the act of genuinely seeing people, of paying the kind of attention to them that said, "You matter, and I am not leaving until I have understood you," opened doors that argument and evangelism had kept sealed. The very thing she had been asked to walk away from had become the key to a door no one else could open. A sketchbook and a Bible, she never needed anything else, and she had both before she ever left England. Before we follow Lilias through the rest of the years and count what she left behind, take a moment to acknowledge the people who keep this work possible. Researching stories like this one takes weeks of digging through Victorian mission records, personal journals that have never been digitized, correspondence that has never been published. The witnesses we cover at Gathering of Souls are the ones the church needs and the ones history chose not to prioritize. Our members are the reason these stories get told at all. If you want to stand in the same spirit as the people we cover, if you want to be part of the community that ensures these legacies are not buried in silence, hit the join button on the channel page or follow the membership link in the description. You will not just be supporting a channel. You will be choosing to do what Lilias did with her sketchbook, to pay attention to things that deserve to be seen. Now, back to Algeria, and to the cost that came not at the beginning, but in the slow middle of the years. The days in Algiers were not what the inside of a drawing room looks like. The heat in summer was severe and total. Lilias did not live in the European quarter. with its shade trees and social calendar and rhythms that had nothing to do with the Medina around it. She rented rooms that placed her as close to the old city as she could get, within earshot of its sounds, within walking distance of the households she had been invited into. She was not visiting people's lives. She was arranging her own life around theirs. This is the discipline she had learned in the East End of London, and practiced here at far greater cost, not visiting the world, but moving toward it. She ate where they ate. She walked where they walked. She learned the particular Arabic of Algiers until she could pray in it. She was not welcomed everywhere, but she was not standing at a comfortable distance either. She had been formed in London by women in the Keswick movement who had poured their understanding of the surrendered life into her. She poured that same formation into the women she was now spending her years alongside. She did not produce converts the way a program produces statistics. She produced people who had been genuinely changed at the level of character and soul by sustained contact with someone who refused to treat them as a project. The Apostle Paul once wrote from prison about people he had brought to faith while he himself was in chains, saying that his bonds were not an obstacle to the ministry, but the condition of it. The chains gave him access that no fresh man could have had. Lilias would have understood this exactly. The heart condition that every mission society had used to reject her application. She outlived every prediction by decades. She served 40 years in North Africa. The weakness became the proof. What sustained her was not the health her doctors had required her to have. It was a source of endurance they had no category for. During those middle decades, she wrote small, illustrated devotional books and sent them into the world without expecting them to be noticed. Parables of the Cross, focused, between the desert and the sea, each one decorated throughout with the drawings she had continued making. The desert flowers, the play of light on stone, the same quality of attention that had stopped Ruskin in a London drawing room 30 years before, now rendered in service of teaching rather than reputation. The gift had not disappeared. She had simply taken it somewhere. It could not be celebrated. She wrote in her journal, "Nothing is ever lost that is done for God." She wrote it like someone who needed to hear it, not like someone who was certain. Lilias Trotter died on August 27, 1928, in Algeria. She was 75 years old. She died in the country she had chosen, in the city she had come to love, surrounded by the women she had spent her life working alongside. She left behind no building bearing her name, no institution that would carry her in its annual reports. The art world that Ruskin had once opened a door into wrote no obituary. The London papers said almost nothing. The woman he had called the most gifted he had ever encountered simply was not part of the story the world was telling about that era. For decades after her death, the most accessible account of her life was a short memoir written by a friend and published in 1938 for Christian readers in a print run that did not survive a generation. Her paintings, over 1,000 of them produced across 40 years in North Africa, were scattered, some were lost. Most sat uncatalogued in private collections and mission archives unseen. If you went looking for Lilias Trotter in a library in 1970, you would have found almost nothing. A footnote in a survey of Victorian women missionaries, perhaps. A name mentioned in passing in a record about Ruskin's circle of acquaintances. The most celebrated offer she had ever received, the most authoritative voice in the Victorian art world telling her she was made for immortality. And what the world eventually wrote about her amounted to a pamphlet and a footnote. Would you do what she did if you knew it would come to this? If you had known, standing across the table from Ruskin in 1876, that the art world would close behind you like water over a stone, that 40 years in Algeria would leave almost no visible record, that you would die in 1928 with your paintings uncatalogued, your name absent from the histories of both art and mission, your small devotional books out of print, before the generation that followed you had grown old. That is the final price she paid, not the North African heat, not the decades of slow planting in soil that showed almost no outward movement. The price she paid at the end of all of it was obscurity, the willingness to pour everything she had been given into a field where almost no one was watching, and to trust that faithfulness has an accounting that is longer than a human life. She paid it without a plan for how she would be remembered, with her sketchbook open on her lap and her journals filling with prayers to an audience of one, without ever asking for a receipt. Now here is where the arithmetic shifts. In 2014, 86 years after Lilias died in Algeria, a filmmaker named Laura Waters Hinson went looking for her. She had found the name in a footnote and could not leave it alone. What she uncovered in the archives was staggering. Over 1,000 paintings and drawings produced across 4 decades in North Africa. Watercolors of the Algerian desert, studies of light falling across the faces of women in the Medina, illustrations of flowers rendered with the precision of someone who had spent a lifetime learning how to genuinely see. The filmmaker made a documentary, Many Beautiful Things, that was released in 2015 and brought Lilias Trotter to an audience that had never heard her name. The Bodleian Library at Oxford acquired an archive of her work. Art historians who had spent careers studying Victorian painters began to write about her. Her illustrated devotional books were republished and found readers across the world who wept over them a century after she had written them by lamplight in rooms that smelled of North African dust. The Algiers mission band she had co-founded in a rented room in 1888 became part of a larger mission organization whose work continues in North Africa today. The women she had trained, the formation she had poured into them through decades of presence and patient investment, did not disappear when she did. It scattered. It continued. Ruskin had told her she could achieve immortality through her art. He was right. He was simply wrong about the shape it would take. Seeds planted in faithfulness do not expire. They wait in the ground for the moment the season is right, and they break the surface in a year that the person who planted them never lived to see. God keeps better records than history does. His accounting is longer than ours. There is a principle in Lilias Trotter's story that the church desperately needs to hear right now. The harvest she never saw was real. The accounting she never received was being kept. The 1,000 paintings sitting in those boxes were not lost. They were waiting. The gift she laid down in a London drawing room was not abandoned. It was redirected to a place where it would do something no gallery wall could have allowed it to do. The thing she sacrificed became the instrument. The thing she supposedly gave up was the very thing God used to open the door. What is the sketchbook in your hand that you are only using in places where people will notice it? What door has God shown you that you cannot enter from where you are currently standing? You stayed to the end. And so, as promised, here is what kept Lilias going through 40 years of faithful work in a field the world was not watching. The first discipline was consecrated seeing. She did not draw to produce art. She drew to pay attention, to see people the way she believed God saw them, as worth looking at, worth capturing, worth the time it takes to stop and really look. This is not a discipline available only to people with artistic gifts. It is a posture of the soul available to anyone willing to stop moving long enough to genuinely see the person in front of them. The sketchbook was the particular form her attention took. What lies underneath it is transferable to any hands, in any calling. The second discipline was staying inside. When Lilias arrived in Algiers, every European Christian was living in the European quarter. Year by year, she moved her life as close as she was permitted to the world she had come to reach. She did not visit people's lives. She arranged her own life in the direction of theirs. This is incarnational presence. Not as a theological concept, but as a daily decision about where you sleep, what you hear when you wake up, whose rhythms shape your mornings. It cost her the comfort of belonging to the world that had once been ready to celebrate her. She chose to stop belonging there. The third discipline was written prayer. She kept journals, not for publication, not as a record for posterity, but because she was working out her life in the presence of God, and she needed the discipline of putting it down on paper to keep believing. In the thin seasons, what she knew was true in the full ones. Nothing is ever lost that is done for God. She wrote it because she needed it. The journals survived. They became the record a filmmaker found 86 years later. She wrote them for an audience of one, and they ended up speaking to thousands. A woman with a weak heart, no institutional support, and a sketchbook that the most celebrated critic of her era once told her could make her immortal. She took the sketchbook into the Medina. She drew until her hands grew slow. She died in the country she had chosen, in the city she had come to love, having given 40 years to people the rest of her world never learned the names of. And 86 years later, an archivist opened a box in a quiet room and found 1,000 paintings, and the world began, finally, slowly, to understand what she had been doing all along. Comment below with, "Nothing is ever lost that is done for God." If you are ready to stop measuring faithfulness by what you can see and start trusting God's accounting over your own, comment those words and let us know where you are being asked to pay a price that no one is watching you pay. Don't forget to hit the notification bell, like, and subscribe to Gathering of Souls for more stories of the witnesses who ran the race before us, the ones who paid prices the world forgot to record. This week, identify one gift you are currently using only in places where it will be noticed. One opportunity, one relationship, one space where that same gift could be taken somewhere it will not be applauded. Write it down. Ask God whether the sketchbook belongs in the Medina. Lilias took the thing the art world wanted and carried it into a closed city. The next witness we are covering took something no one in his tradition had ever attempted to give, and the price he paid would not be fully understood for nearly a century. What does a man do when God asks him to enter a world so sealed that the only way in is to give up the one thing that marks him as free? What does faithfulness look like in a field where no results are visible for decades? And what does his story say directly to you about the assignment you have been quietly backing away from? Check out this next video to find out.